First few questions come from one of the write-in questions up front. How can you keep from taking on too much in terms of customers?
How can you keep from taking on too much
In terms of customers.
in terms of customers? When can you have too many customers? You just have to put them in the right order. That's what you have to do. I don't know that we've ever been in that situation, but I can tell you one thing is that actually last year was our best year financially. Kinefat Corporation's a company of only 56 people. We build forming machinery worldwide, spring-making machinery with wire down as small as 1,000th of an inch to roll form parts for wind turbines that may weigh several hundred pounds. And customers, I think you have to sift through your customer list, because if you go to any shows, what you find out are there are the people that are curious. They're the people that are truly interested in what you do. And there are people that want you to do things for free. And there are people who are really interested, and you find out by saying it is going to cost you X dollars to find out. Typically, when someone asks us, oh, can we make some prototypes of a coil? We said, we'll be glad to send you a quotation. And it really separates the men and the boys, because you could spend your lifetime making things for free. So our approach is, you want to do a development, we will do that for you, but it will cost X dollars.
Yeah, that was a great answer. And I'd echo all of it. And just add, there were several occasions actually when we talked about capacity utilization at a company like Blue Sky. And we had waves of sort of, I guess I would call popularity within different market strata for what we were doing. And we would always fall back on the easiest prioritization, which is who's going to be here next year and the year afterwards? Where is our sustainable recurring revenue coming from? And fortunately for us, we had 9 out of Fortune's top 10, but we wouldn't exclude the hot upstart companies like Sertris. Those are the big stories. The folks that usually in a time where we are in high demand, we would turn away through a process of price escalation were the academics. And that's unfortunate in some ways, but that's just a reality. I think that's the point, is you really need to understand your capacity first and then just tune it with your priorities. And we got to a point at a certain life stage of the company where we really were very proactive in finding customers where those customers are, and not going where the customers we didn't want are. You can do that, especially in the digital age with digital marketing.
We never say never. From a business point of view, we keep track of what we call a prospect list and a real list. We have about a 10 to 15% capture rate. That doesn't mean that everybody's going to come to us. But most of them, being a young startup or a seed startup, don't have the money. So a lot of them drop off by the wayside. And I always laugh too. I say to some companies, I dated for 10, 15, 2, 3, 5 years, and all of a sudden they re-emerge because they've raised the money or whatever. But we're at about a 95% occupancy rate. But we're always, like we were saying, wanting to move them out so that they get out on their own. And so we know that very few companies will come and start right away. There's a lag time between when they decide to come and when they go. And the vast majority of them, through no fault of their own, but they're not able to mostly get any money, get started at all. So we keep track on a yearly basis. A prospect is someone who comes into our facility. So I talk to everybody and the email and I call them and we talk about a real prospect is somebody who actually comes in and sees it, and then we work off that list, and of that about 10 to 15%. And we've been in some times where we've committed a lab to 2 people at the same time, but it always has worked out.
Can I add one other thing? What Paul said, and in his talk, that he's been in business, he started a company, and from my perspective, it's on a short time base. Kinefac has been around for just over 50 years, and I've been employed there 45. And I just kind of wanted to reinforce some of the things that he said that we sort of learned the hard way. But I think in terms of tonight's topic of reinventing your market strategy, I'm not sure you have to reinvent it. I think the principles are the same. I heard him say, everything that I've done in 45 years, you have to be a force. You have to. My mentor, Howard Grice, who started the company in '62, he always said you needed to be a champion. Champion of the project you want to work on. The 3 things that for us works is to establish technical competence, education of both your employees and your customers. You have to be ahead of the ball to tell your customers you can do this or you can't do this. And you have to be technically competent enough for them to say, I believe them. And the third is to listen to everyone. If you want to know where you have to go, you have to listen to everyone in the field. And we had a question over here that came to Paul, and it seemed to indicate like where you're going. Are you reckless? And our approach has always been, if you don't have failures, you're not doing enough. If you succeed 90% of the time, you're doing terrific. That 10% you can afford to lose. If you're succeeding 100% of the time, you're missing out on some real opportunities. Christine?
Okay, so our next question is, in terms of R&D, research and development, tell us about your greatest discovery and your greatest letdown.
Oh, that's easy. I can tell you about the greatest letdown. Our greatest letdown is always what we considered a technical achievement. We would try something and we would put a lot of effort and a lot of time into it, and we could get it to work, but we could never really sell it. So that was a technical achievement. We've had a few of those. We've had some real bombs. Big plus is when we entered into the machine business, and again, referring to Paul, we are one of the vendors. We build equipment. So someone has an idea, they come to us to ask about a piece of equipment to produce prototypes, but to do production. We are not on the production end of manufacturing, so we're somewhere in the middle. And The biggest achievement, I think probably in my career, is the development of several pieces of machinery. One is that we now have probably 80 machines out in the field making medical device coils. These coils go onto your guide wire systems. They go into any type of exploratory devices. Some of the coils are used in aneurysm stuffing. We don't want to get into this, it's too late to talk about going into someone's brain, but these are very small. Wire sizes are typically down in the region of 1/3 the diameter of your hair. And the typical coil is only 3 times the diameter of your hair. So we started from scratch. We listened to everybody in the industry as to what we needed to do. We put together the equipment, and we've sold that equipment now constantly for about 15 years. The biggest challenge is what you miss, what we used to call the what if. What if this happens? What if you can't get the tools made? And we totally misjudged the ability to have these tools made, because we would say, we need to make a small tool. And we would send out the drawings. And everybody would call up and say, wow, that's really small. I said, yeah, but you said you can make small tools, but we can't make anything that small. So we had to develop a whole system of manufacturing tools. Some of the tools are actually natural diamond that we've learned to manipulate and process into tools. So for me, that's been my big plus.
You know, we're all about the companies, but I look back on some of them. One of them, obviously, is Maury Krauss, who came here to go to graduate school and had terrific stem cell therapy technology. He was ahead of his time, went public, and now PerkinElmer has bought the company, and it's growing. Just his stick-to-itness and dealing with a real fascination of not only the science, but the politics behind stem cell therapy and trying to get that through. Paul, obviously, on the contract research and contract manufacturing side, was way ahead of his time. And so I have to think of those kinds of companies. There's been a lot of good ones. And I don't just look at money. I look at the success of what they did, and they were ahead of their time in those particular areas. One that I'm obviously the biggest disappointment, they just went out of business, Bob. Apparently, they just closed their door. They had that. He's a professor here at WPI and started with us and had a very unique, dealing with diabetes. Kind of the whole idea of glucose monitoring and then the insertion of the patch. And they ran out of money, and technology didn't go down, didn't happen, and I got really disappointed. But the one for the future I'm making a prediction on is one of our companies called Iomics, IOmics.com. They are way ahead of the curve in terms of informatics and personalized medicine, predictive analytics, and I'm really bullish on them. In the next couple of years, you're going to hear about them. So from a science point of view, those are some of the ones that I love.
Yeah, I'll keep it short. It's like a stripe on your shoulder when you work on a project as a partner with a company that has the ability to bring a medicine to market. Companies like Epizyme and others that we've worked with, those are our crowning achievements as a partner. They've let us into their labs to be a part of that sort of idea to drug pipeline, and then they've delivered something to a patient. That's the good stuff. It's always been the real marrow, if we will, for drug discovery and for scientists, whether we're inside of Epizyme or we're external as a partner. And to these former points, the letdowns are when you had the idea to enter into a market space and you didn't put a high enough priority on it, or you didn't develop quickly enough internally. to meet the mark, and someone else got there first. You know, those are letdowns, and it happens.
Great, I'm gonna ask one more question, and then we'll open it up to audience questions. Paul mentioned thinking of treating vendors as partners. And I'm wondering if you can each give an example of how you've done this, and do you think that it's improved your R&D, or can you give an example if you've have an example of how this has helped you create a different product or a different process?
That is an interesting question, because we at Kinefec have several vendors, and there really is no formal agreement between these folks and ourselves. But we have worked with them, and one of them I've worked my whole career with. And it's all based on an understanding between honest people. The pricing is honest, the dealings are honest, there's no stealing of information. Everything is confidential, and we just work together. It's as if it was a little subdivision of the company that's over here in Connecticut or over here in New York, and it works well, but it's really based on trust as a vendor.
Well, you know, so I gave these examples of vendorship versus partnership, and you know, when you approach a company like, I'll just name the names. It's Pfizer, Merck, or Novartis. They've depleted themselves. They need a partner. So there are a lot of examples where you do have to de-risk their ideas by, there are actually a couple of really great examples where just recently, within the last 2 or 3 years, those big companies could not afford to get pieces of equipment in order to interrogate some of their lead compounds, and asked Blue Sky to do it. And said there was nothing contractual. They said, if you do this, I'm sure you could sell this to other people, but you need to buy this $100,000 instrument to do it. And luckily for us, as to my former point, we had agile thinkers. We could come in and perform this at a true partnership level, which was, we're actually making an investment here, this better work out, because if the data from this over 6 months, the delivery to this company wasn't what it was supposed to be, they wouldn't continue to spend money with us. So I think it's just an example of where you really do have to have that trust in the relationship and also your own people to de-risk and move into a partnership and move away from vendorship, and then you're locked in. I think for most companies, when you're offering a bundle of solutions, some of it is going to be more marginal than others, and some of it, if you really want that long-run sustainable relationship, it's based on trust. It definitely is. It's a great point, and it has to be a partnership. When you move towards vendorship, that means, in my opinion, you're moving towards a lot of parity in the marketplace, and you're setting yourself for decisions being made by procurement offices instead of scientists that you work with. And you know what that's all about. It's just about RFPs and pricing. That's when you're a vendor.
Yeah, 3 for 3. I thought your word trust is absolutely right on. We're working with companies that are very vulnerable. I mean, they don't have the resources that they need to succeed, so they look to us. So first, we have to have a trust between the companies and ourselves. But I sometimes play the father role, in the sense I'm overly protective of these little companies, and I don't want them to be taken advantage of or whatever. So I'm being protective, and so when they come to me, I feel like the advice that you offer is like it's either going to be up or down. So I just find that there's so many resources out there that have been, so good to us along the way and to all of our companies in so many different ways. But it does come down, Charlie, to trust. There's no question about it, and we've been very lucky at that.
I just have to add sort of a little funny story. We build the machinery to make these small coils, and we do get startups in, and we have some of the big names, the Boston Scientifics, et cetera, that come and they talk about a coil, and the bigger the company is, the first thing you see is a non-disclosure agreement. But they really want some information, and they know that the lawyers are going to take days, if not weeks, to do this non-disclosure agreement. So we kind of wheedle about, and we say, well, what size is the wire? And they give us a number. And what size is the diameter of the coil? And they give us a number. And so we get enough information, and then I just trottle off, and I go into my office, and I've just got stacks of samples of things that we've made. And I reach into a little box, and I take out my little box with some of these coils, and I trottle back to the conference room, and I said, is this what you're trying to make? And they said, yeah, you can already do that? I said, yeah. So we can do the non-disclosure agreement later, but we already know how to make this coil. So how many do you want?
Let's get to the chase.
Great. So does anyone have any other questions for our panelists? Allison?
I'm interested, particularly for Paul, you sound like you're agile thinkers, always found a way to work their way through. And was there a time where they came up against something that they just couldn't figure out? And how did you deal with that? I'm going to repeat the question.
Yes. Yes, they definitely, I think one of the pitfalls, especially in the beginning of the company, was the idea that when someone in our customer base has a problem and they can't get something to work at the lab bench, that there's this company out there that's been doing this for X amount of years and does 1,000 projects a year. They should be able to solve this problem. And I think the tyranny of our own success in several occasions could catch up with us. And I don't mean our own, I mean an individual. There were times when highly accomplished scientists at Blue Sky, as well as the salespeople, they were both meeting with a customer who had this problem. And of course, they said, well, yeah, we're solution providers, we can solve this problem. And yeah, there are many examples of that. And so the interesting part of that question is there was no roadmap for dealing with this. And we are dealing, when you try to be, let's go to the last question, when you try to be a partner, then you present yourself as an expert. And you are an expert, but you're not God. You can't solve some biological problems. And so we would have a team look at certain requests, and this didn't happen until 2009. So we were in business for 6 years before we had a process in place to, I don't probably need this, but we had a process in place where we would determine whether something was a highly customized research project versus an actual deliverable at an endpoint. And because and part of me didn't want to do that. That was, just, it's almost the fault of, yeah, of course, our customers will know that this is research if nobody's ever done it before, but you would be surprised at how many people would say, I'm not paying you because you didn't solve the problem. We were actually doing research in many cases. So we had to put some upfront language in place, and then also qualify certain projects. So we would sort of insulate ourselves from those downfalls. And make no mistake about it, that's a two-way street. That's setting expectations as a partner and to your customer or your partner on the other side. And also that that trust that we just talked about of the partner saying, okay, I can see by the data you guys you answered all the questions, you did all the research. I'm going to pay you for doing the research, even though the outcomes weren't what we wanted. So we ran into that a lot, and we had to learn our lesson.
Yeah, I think you're right. And again, it boils down to having an honest relationship with the customer and an open communication. If you do a development, you owe him the fact that you may only have a 40% success rate. He really needs to know that up front so that he knows he's investing the money to see if this will work. And those are really the hardest jobs to do, and I think those, from my perspective, I spend more time and effort at trying to get it right on that type of a development job. Those marginal ones that you say, I'm not going to give up, I'm going to try one more thing. I think I can do this. And so long as you document it, you provide him with your results, he feels comfortable that he's been treated fairly. And you move on to the next one.
Is there a question?
How, you keep talking about getting trust and building trust, but if you're a brand new, small company who hasn't been linked to Pfizer for the past few years, doesn't have those incoming connections, how do you start building the trust? How do you make them take a chance on you? Especially if it's something where it is innovative or cutting edge, where maybe there's not a whole lot of documentation of things for that stuff in the past, or maybe you don't have anything to show that we've already been doing this for years because it's brand new.
That's what's called a gut feeling. I mean, there's no other way to put it. If you talk to 2 or 3 people to see who can do the work for you, you have to make some assessment as to whether A, B, or C is being the most honest, is giving you the best data, appears to be technically competent, is not trying to sell you everything in the kitchen. And I think you have to go with a gut feeling. It's just, I think this person can do the work for me.
You know, I have actually several layers to that question. One is if you're designing a company, they make it part of your marketing to do the experiment before they ask for it and show them what you could do. If you know what you want to sell, find a way to get it done, put it into your marketing materials and say, this is what I could do for you. Because there's trust in data. If we're talking about something that I'm involved with, I mean, if it was monoclonal antibody production, and you wanted to sell some, well, you'd have to put that into your marketing. Like it's almost like selling a car, except here's what it's going to look like when I'm done with your experiment. And that's part of your marketing. You spend money to get that done. That's one area to gain trust. There's also a way that I'm working with a couple of companies right now to go to labs that have thought leadership, are on, their CEOs and CSOs are on tour, highly credible, and do work with them that you can find a win-win, and you might have to put your skin in the game and de-risk it for them to do it, but get the rights to talk about it publicly so you can associate, and this is, the scientific industry for marketing is hierarchical, and there's a lot of people that look up to thought leadership. If you LinkedIn, let's say, I don't mean the software, I mean if you connected with a thought leader and said, I would love to do this work for you guys at X amount of money, or you just chalk it up to marketing expense to get the company rolling. If I can use your name when I go around, you're establishing that credibility and some trust by association with that name.
You know, that's a good question for the smaller companies. I live by the creed, you know, the world's run by those who show up, those people that are out there all the time, making themselves available, building partnerships and collaborations, coalitions. That's where the future lies. Anyone, I've got people that like to kind of sconce in their lab by themselves, and you know, they're great scientists, but I also see there are companies that build teams. I usually find the most successful ones is one that handles the science and one that handles the business, and they work jointly together. Because I think, frankly, when you're trying to get money, people want to know who you're associated with. Who's your science advisory committee? Who are some of your partners? So those are the kinds of things you have to think about in your business plan before you launch. That, you know, you've got these people who are with you. They may not be your customers, but they're partners and they're resources that you can turn to. And in turn, you know, you build the credibility then, and you know, one customer at a time, and just keep growing. But it's a great question, because people oftentimes just think the switch goes off, and by themselves they're going to do that. But we're living in a world today that's not only global, but you've got to build partnerships and collaborations to succeed.
Any other questions?
So you both have about the same size company, totally different fields. How were you able to use project management in reinventing your companies?
So the question was, how are you using project management to reinvent your companies?
In your company.
And innovation.
Hardest people to find are project managers in our space. And now that I'm outside of Blue Sky, it's day to day, and I've gone to some of our competitors and talked to them as partners, finding ways for Blue Sky and some of those 10-year rivals to team up on different projects. It's one comment that comes to the surface all the time. It's tough to find people who can straddle the business objectives of the company and reach into the lab to get things done with the lab teams. And it's coordinated. You know, you've got a diverse sort of group of functional expertise that you need to pool together. The role of project management is vital. So to reinventing strategy, the role of project management, I mean, those people are on the front lines. They're often the people that they're going to some of those companies, and they're seeing more than maybe a salesperson would, and they're seeing more of the science than maybe a salesperson would. And this is just our small company, perspective. These dual function types, the two-tool employees, and they're seeing more business than a scientist would, right? So instead of sending both a scientist and a salesperson together, if you had a project manager who's got enough of each of those sides, they might see those opportunities, and they often do. They pull in more business, and also they're not as threatening. He's not there. They're not sitting there trying to sell somebody something. They are like a lab down the hall, sitting with the customers, and the more questions they ask and the more they listen, the more opportunities come up. So they're vital. They're a keystone.
Yeah, we really don't have that type of an issue. I mean, as a machine tool manufacturer, we usually have a project manager who, because of his longevity of service, knows what we need to do. And his responsibility is interaction with customers, interaction with the folks that are on the assembly floor putting it together, the machine shops that are working to make the components, and ultimately will be responsible for the machine runoff at our facility, the machine runoff at the customer's facility, be it US or global, and also if anything goes wrong, he has to take that piece of it too. So our policy is when you start a project with a particular customer, you finish it with that customer. and you have total responsibility from the start to the finish. From the time we quote a machine till the time it's installed in the customer's facility, that project manager has got the ball. And most of our guys have been brought up from within. They may have started on the assembly floor, they may have started in the machine shop, they worked their way into sales, they worked their way into the engineering office. We spend a lot of time helping our guys with educational programs. So for us, managing the project is everything. Like I say, we have 56 guys, and we probably have in the vicinity of 30 ongoing projects that are simultaneously being worked on, not counting whatever we're in the process of quoting. So we get spread out pretty thin sometimes.
Any other questions? Great, well, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to our panel.